So a little bit of my journey with the Push. I started with the Push 2. I saw that beautiful video of Jonathan Stein playing, and I'm a bass player, right? And when you play the bass, you have all these frets and stuff, and basically the strings are lined out in fourths. Without getting too music nerdy right off the bat here, it's like fourths and half steps. And so when I saw Jonathan Stein playing this thing right here, I realized that, oh, it's like if I took this hand and I just turned it this way and put it on the John right here. I was like, this is super tight. Like, because before that I was like, man, I had an APC 40. I was like, there's no reason for me to buy a Push. Like, I don't need this. Like, this isn't something that is gonna help me. I have drum pads. They're bigger. I don't need any of this stuff. And then I saw that, and man, I'm trash at playing the keyboard. Like, I love playing bass. I practice bass all the time. It's like, being able to utilize the language that I already had, and then do that with whatever synth or keyboard patch you have, that made me really happy. So that's cool. And then I guess in front of you, if you want to, just so we can start to kind of get into this process, there's this page button, top left-hand corner. Hit this, and we're going to be opening up our set. So you'll see these options for set library or sets. I would encourage to go to set library, then go to projects. And from there, you'll find this thing. It's called AAA Trusko template or something like that. So that should be cool. And then we're using this jog wheel over here to kind of maneuver through this. I realize I'm going a little quick there, but yeah, so I'm hitting the page. And then I'm utilizing these encoders at the top to be able to select where we're at. So this first encoder is going to choose between the locations. And then the next one down would select the next part. And then if there was another location, you could hit the wheel and move on. Sometimes you use the encoder. So I saw a lot of people that use the 2, right? Push 2. So there's been a few adjustments, as you can see, with the jog wheel, as well as some of the other parts of this. Let me see if I can pull up this diagram real quick. So like just a brief explanation here, right? Encoders are the ones at the top. Then you have like the display buttons. You have the upper and the lower. Then you have the pads that change function, right? And then the stuff that's like new for the people moving from 2, you can access your sets, you can access your settings. Then you have this learn button, which is kind of like the info view, you know what I mean, in the full standard software situation. And then you have this user button here. So yeah, cool. That's kind of some of the basics. The 2 things that like took me getting used to is where the undo and delete buttons are. I feel like that's the most important thing in my life when I'm live looping on stage, is knowing where that stuff is. And so you have the one here, undo, and then your delete is down here. So the nice thing, there's not as much like doubling up on buttons as there was in the past, so it's a little more clear to see just which functions are on which buttons, with the exception of the swing and tempo knob and the volume knob. So if you're having any, let me get myself. All right, cool. So you can very quickly see that I like to play in a very specific format, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But these 2 wheels here, right? This first one is going to deal with the different kinds of outputs, so you can switch between this to be getting your main volume, the preview and cue, the output. Does that make sense, right? I know some of this is maybe a little basic, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page so that you're not, diving through, wondering what's going on. This next wheel down here, you have tempo, and then you also have the ability, if I can get mine to behave, to get to swing. So you can do your swing percentage, and then you could flip back to do tempo. You also have this global groove amount. Yeah, so those are like the biggest adjustments from 2 to 3 that kind of were freaking me out. And then these buttons in the top right-hand corner with the device view, that's been there before, mix. Then you have the 2 where, clip view, but then you have the one where this is pretty tight to be able to see session view up here and make selections, which makes it really possible to be able to be playing a chord or something and then be able to select another location at the same time. Okay, so settings. This, John, is where a lot of the settings are all located. When I'm first getting a push and I don't know what's going on, like if I was sitting in on somebody else's, I'm going to go through, check out status. There's this button that says Control Live. This is the ability to switch the device between standalone and as functioning as a controller. Everything else on here is pretty self-explanatory. That's where the Wi-Fi is and the display brightness. As we move across here, expression, this is where you can set up how the pads function, right? So one of the big things about Push 3 is the concept of MPE, which allows for a few other ways of getting expression off the pads. And actually, maybe this might be a good time to talk about that. So in this big group, there's a bunch of stuff labeled here. The one labeled wavetable is this. Well, actually, yeah, the one labeled wavetable is set up to be like a pad. This one labeled bass. Let me get this dialed up a little bit. So one of the things with MP is you can slide chromatically from any note to any note, right? So, and then you can also set it up where so that's the note pitch bend, meaning like per note, each one of these could go a different direction. Kind of fun. And then you also have the ability to take a single note, and as I slide up and down on the pad, you can see I have this set up where the position on wavetable is shifting, right? And it's also messing with the pulse width as well. But see, I could keep these down. And the high note could be a little bit brighter if you wanted it to be. So you can see how this starts to make this feel more like an instrument, less like a controller, which is super tight for playing ideas on it. Yeah. So let's get cracking on some things. So if you open up this group, if we're taking a look at the top here, I have it. There's a spot here labeled group. It could be closed. If you click on the display buttons, you'll be able to open that up. Sometimes it's easiest to see stuff if you're hitting this mix button up here on the right side. If I hit this until I can see the individual tracks, you can kind of see what's going on. This is like a good home base for me, because then if I'm looping stuff, I can see, there's sound coming through there, there's sound coming through there, there's sound coming through there. You can see them all on the meters, right? So under percussion sample, we're going to select that. Now notice my pads are blank. This has to deal with what's going on the right side here. There's these two buttons. You have session and note. And so if I switch this over to the session, this is functioning as a glorified, you're looking at session view in Ableton, right? So these would be individual clips. These would be the individual tracks. These would be the scenes. These would cue the scenes, right? So I put a couple samples in here because I thought it would be cool to talk about that right up front. So the first one is going to be here. And if I click it, we're going to hear a bunch of random percussion things from my house. And actually, on the right side, I can click over to this clip view button, and I'm going to be able to see everything going on in there. And there's a bunch of different sounds. So I'm going to first probably just turn up the gain on this a little bit, see if I can hear what's going on. That's a little toy frog from my box of percussion toys. Yeah, I'm just kind of listening through to see what else is in here. But what we're going to do is we're going to sample this. We're going to cut this up and see if we can make some rhythmic ideas and some stuff with it. So once you've selected this, you can hit the convert button, and then you would convert this over to simpler, right? And then I could switch my mode over to slicing, and then I can move my start position around, and you can see it sliced this into a bunch of little pieces. Now I'm going to switch back over to my note mode, and I'm going to play around and try to see if I can find some things that make sense for me. This is cool. Some claps and stuff. I like this tempo maybe. Let's see. And maybe a little bit slower. Cool. So I want to record in an idea. I like what I got going on. I can use the record button right here, and I'm going to switch the view just so you can kind of see what's going on. As I hit record, it's going to record into the clip. And I could close this, and it'll do that. Now, what kind of stinks is something Rob was talking about earlier. We want to cook quick, right? I love not having to touch the computer. I love not having to edit things. If I can get it from here to the world as quick as possible, you know, that's the best idea. So what I need to do is I'm jumping over to this clip view here. Notice how I got this dead bar, right? You could come over and crop your clip length by changing the length of this and hitting that. Or I could hit new and I could perform this in again with fixed length on. This is a long loop. Cool. Ta-da. And then you could keep that running, and then you could start moving on to some other stuff. So I'll let you all mess around with the sampler for a minute. Does anybody have questions? I have the sample on screen, right? I have it selected. This is the one labeled perk samp. If I come down here on the right side, you're going to see this convert button. When I hit convert, I'm going to say convert to simpler. That's going to make it a new track that sits adjacent to it. And then from there is where I will change the mode on the top right-hand corner. Does that make sense? I apologize. I'm speeding through the parts that I know, and then I'm talking really slowly about the parts I can't talk about. Yeah, you get about an hour on that battery. It's pretty tight, but yeah, you gotta cook quick. You got 2 hours on yours?
2 hours, that's it.
Yeah. I think depending on how heavy the session is and how old the battery is. You can create your own, and let me show you real quick. Once you guys are all set up, I can show you guys how to just like do some of the basics of what we're doing here as well. So let me know once y'all are set. But basically, on the right side here, you have this plus button, and that allows you to add devices or tracks. So I would go, you know, on the people that already have the session up, I would encourage like adding an additional track as opposed to like just changing the instrument on there, depending on how you want to cook. But you know, I would go to like add, you know, MIDI track or add audio track. If you add an audio track, or rather, excuse me, add a MIDI track, and then you could go through and pick what instrument, and you could kind of dig through to try to find some samples as well. So you can see, you can scroll through here and you can pick your own sounds, right? So this button is basically functioning as the browser. How many have gotten some like percussion stuff done and that's gonna slice it? What do you do then? Then you're kind of trying to just come up with ideas or just kind of mess with it. Yeah, right here on the right side. This is the session versus note.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, this is the one I'm probably spending a lot of time flipping back and forth between. And you can see when you're, let me tell you a couple things too. When you're in this mode, and actually I'm going to use drums for this demonstration because I think it'll be easier. If you close your group all the way to the right, there's a drum kit. I labeled all the stuff on it by colors. So you have a kick, then you have snare. The yellows are the hi-hats, open hi-hat. And I'm kind of doing this thing where, real slow, I'm hitting the hi-hat on every beat, and then I'm hitting with my index finger on the other ones. So I'm doing a lot of playing in, but that's just one way of approaching this. So another way you could do this is got to deal with the modes. On the right side here, you're going to see this layout button. And see how it jumps, it says 16 velocities, it says macro variations, 64 pads. If you have this set up to be loop selector, what that means is if I click in the right 16 here, this is functioning now as a sequencer. So I could put on every downbeat, I could put a kick drum just by selecting it and then drawing it in. I could come over here, put a snare on 2 and 4, hi-hat. You could draw these in. You could select stuff, and depending on which view you're in, if I'm in this, you gotta be in the clip view to do this. You can select them and you could nudge these around or do edits to them. Yeah, some other things to consider with samples is changing the sensitivity to find things that are stronger, or increasing this to find things that are kind of weaker. I also included on there an EQ3, and these buttons on the left here are like stop, clip, mute, and solo, and you can actually unmute the EQ, and it's going to kind of function as like a band pass. So I might do this and then boost the gain on the whole thing a little bit more. This is a great question. I come from the camp of there's like a finger drummer named Stro Elliott, and so Stro does this thing where in the right hand, like if we're counting the beat, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like he's doing all this with just his right hand, and then my left hand is doing all the upbeats. And if I sped this up, or if I played something else, like you could have these snares here, you could. You know what I mean? You could do stuff like that or whatever. So I'll kind of do a combination of, sometimes I play ideas in, sometimes I'm doing sequencers. Sometimes I'll start, like if you, has everybody been messing around enough? Can I show you all something? Yeah. Okay, cool. Tight. So this is just if I do a bunch of different things with the push. Sometimes I'm in the studio and I'm working with people. I'm not doing anything but playing my part, and I'll just play key bass with this. Other times I'm going in and I'm cooking up whole tracks. Sometimes I'm sitting in nature. That's one of the things I love about this. It does have a battery, so you can get out there about like an hour, 2 hours, depending on how heavy the track load is on what you're doing. So sometimes I'll start a template up at home, throw it on this, go and cook in nature for a little bit, come back home, chop it up the next day, release it or do something with it. When I'm playing drums, there's tempos that I just feel better at. I'm a big Jay Dilla fan. If you go check out any of his catalog, almost everything is usually like 97, 96, 98, sometimes 92. Like not a lot of like super, you can't actually do the stuff at different tempos. So I, as a bass player, I spent a lot of time with all these drummers. And when I started getting into finger drums, I kept watching like, okay, like how does your hi-hat work? Or like what's going on with the kick? And I think there's a lot of lore about what feels good and what doesn't. And I'm gonna show you a couple things to just show like, I like this, I don't like this, and you can use your own taste to determine. But like if I go to hit this, and I'm gonna put the clip on so you kind of see what I'm doing up here a little bit. That was a little late, and we're turning that off. 1, 2, ready. I'm gonna swing the hi-hat. Right. At the beginning here, the hi-hat is like pretty on the beat. Then I start to, and now it feels kind of like too stupid by the end of this, right? So the first thing is like overly swinging is not necessarily something that feels good. Like you kind of have to play that game. You can do that with on the side here. I'm sorry, you had a question.
No, I was just going to ask if you can turn the cue volume down a little
Yeah,
bit.
totally.
It's a personal preference, but
Yeah,
I want to hear your work.
my deaf ears. Yeah, my buttons have been, if you can't tell, mine's been a little bit through some abuse here. Let me see if I can get it to.
That's the other button. You want a button.
Oh, thank you, dude. I'm sorry, y'all. If you can't tell, we had a very late night the night before,
I'm
so.
surprised you're standing up.
Yeah, of course. Tight. Yeah, so I'm going to do this one more time, but I'm going to show a couple things too. Ready? Sometimes it's pushing, right? And that doesn't always feel that good. Sometimes it sits on. Sometimes it feels better when some things are pushed and some things aren't. So I'm going to do another version of this where I'm holding down this repeater. My swing amount, let me get this thing back to, swing is at 0. I'm just repeating it. You can see it across the top here. I'm I'm gonna play in the kick. And you can see like it's pretty much on. So I'm gonna push the snare. I like where the first one is, but I don't like where the second one is. So I can actually hold this down, and I can actually nudge this thing a little bit forward. And that's like one of the things I feel like people don't talk about with Dilla. Everybody think about things laying back, stuff's laying back. He's a hip hop guy, like it's like, oh, everything's relaxed. It's like, not everything's relaxed. Sometimes the hi-hat is like totally straight. This thing swings like a mug because it's just about where, like the illusion, because the snare's forward, everything else feels back, right? So I typically think about it this way, where it's like the grid is, everything is on the grid, but one of the things is forward. But then if I went over here and I started playing some key bass, you can kind of see some of this stuff's like swung, the second notes are swung, but right, the bass is swung, the hi-hat is totally straight. And that clash is actually tight. Like you don't need everything to be on the same grid, doing all the same things to do that. So it just depends on what your preferences are. Like I said, I came from playing bass, I play jazz, I play hip hop. I like things to swing. Even if I'm doing house stuff, like I throw a little bit more booty in there, just the way things maneuver. So a lot of times if I'm looping live, I'll start doing stuff like this, then this patch is interesting. I'm gonna open it up a little bit. I can do that by selecting on the top here, coming on over. Gonna loop in this chord. And it'll come back right now. And if I'm cooking, I'm like, yo, I don't like that. I got the new button right here. It clears that clip. It's opened up. I'm gonna play something longer. I did 4 chords, and I'm gonna have to adjust this a little bit. But my bass is sustaining. Sounds a little gnarly. I'm gonna change it. You can see how you could end up doing this all day, right? And even if you get it wrong, you just hit the new button, you just try it again, right? Like, and it doesn't matter. You could like watch this. I'm gonna clear these out and leave my groove in there because it feels pretty good. So you might be wondering, it's like, what the hell am I doing with these pads? I mentioned maybe briefly before, but it's like if I took my bass and I just laid it flat, right? So it's in fourths and half steps. What's lit up here is the major scale. And if you don't see that, you can come over here to where it says scale, change this thing. I like to do this, like I mentioned, in fourths. I leave it in C, and I leave it in chromatic. You can see the button down here. So it's crazy because you could put this in something else, and you could come up with tons of different ideas. I like sometimes to put this in key and leave it in fourths. And like literally... Let's see what it is. And then I can come through here. I have this in clip view, and I can crop this down, and I'm going to change the position. I like the last 2 bars. Tight. And then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to change the filter a little bit. I'm going to turn this down. I'm gonna have to make some decisions of what else do I want to do with this. But you can see how you could kind of get into a different playground just by changing the scale and the function of the pads. Questions?
Okay, that's really what I'm asking.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely like language I've developed over time, and then there's some stuff where it's like I don't know what this is gonna sound like. Like today, like right now when I did this, like I'll put you in a mode where like I'm completely terrified, right? Like I don't like I see people use this all the time, thirds and major. I don't know how this works, but I do know I can drag these pads in like a sextuplet. It's gonna sound nice, you know. I know that much about it. Yeah, there's totally, so this mode definitely is more like the second thing you were talking about. This is patterns, you know. I mean, everything with this is patterns, but it's just about how much freedom you can give yourself. In this mode, you know, I've studied jazz for a while. Like, there's tons of stuff where it's like, man, I'll just try to learn the chord progression to a song, but do it in here. And initially, I did everything in C, right, so that I could see visibly what's going on. So, like, for example, I mentioned this is let's do this with the lead. It sounds a little nicer. I'm gonna turn it down though. Right, that's this major scale, right? I'm starting on my ring finger, and then I'm basically doing like, basically doing the 2 notes to a string, then 3 notes, right? If you think about it as like let me try asking this question. How many people play guitar in here? Tight. How many play like bass? Okay, cool. Right, so there's this whole principle with that stuff of like per string how many notes, and you can get a lot of different language based on that. And then from that you can kind of figure out other stuff from it. So I'm taking a lot of like bass and guitar thoughts and then putting them in here. So one idea is like, I have these 2 notes on a string, now I have these 3 notes on a string, 3 notes on a string, 3, 3, 3, and if I put it together, you can do that really quick. And I'm doing 2 notes in my left hand, 1 note in my right. I can do the same thing, it's not as clean, but just with my left hand. I actually can't do this at all with my right hand, like I don't have the same control. That just comes down with like, because I've done this for 20 years, that's a lot easier than like my right hand's garbage. I can, you know, I could sit there and play like a chord maybe or something, but yeah. Does that kind of give some perspective? You can also like, you know, just like not going too deep on the theory part of this, but as Rob was talking about this morning, right? Here's my scale. You can see this kind of light up as I go. See how it repeats over here? That's actually the same note. So that allows you to kind of go, that's the part that feels the most guitar-like with it. So you can end up like playing the same note in 2 places. Right? And the cool thing is like you don't have to sit there and be like, oh, I put my finger on the wrong part of the fret. Like there's a little bit of that danger, right? You can end up being a little too high or a little bit too low and you can get flat, but depending on your preferences, I leave this in the one where it's like in tune location is from where your finger starts, whereas there's another one that's from where the center of the pad is, and that one scares me because certain chord voicings, like my fingers aren't always sitting in the center of the pad. So personally, I like to keep this on finger, and I'm seeing that as the default, so that kind of makes me think I'm not alone in that journey. Any other questions and stuff? Yeah.
How did you open up the different scale patterns?
Yeah, there's this button on the right side that says scale. It's just below the note button, and then you have to hold it down. It's not one of the, well, I guess I'm sorry. You can click it. I have my own bad habits, so forgive me if I'm giving you stuff that I typically just hold it, and then I'm looking for what I want and I let go of it. And that's kind of true with all the buttons. You can hold it down to just access it temporarily versus if you do a click and release, you end up somewhere else. So that can get a little frustrating if you if you're not used to that, but yeah, totally. And scale, and then you have options. You also can do stuff like some of these look crazy, but I'm leaving it in chromatic. But you could just kind of see these. You can come up with different stuff, and it can inspire you to see the pads in a different way. When I first started, I used to do the thing of kind of like the keyboard player transpose button, like, oh, we're in G. And I need to talk about this. So there's a fixed button, and then there's an unfixed. So when you leave this not in fixed, this is C right now because we said it's in C. I switch it to G. This is actually now a G, not a C. But if I set this back to C, and I say fixed, you end up in a spot where when I hit G, see how the lights shifted? Like this is the G, this is the C. they're actually in the same places, but it's just telling you which notes. So it's actually kind of a cool way to get a little bit more like comfortable with seeing the patterns on here in different ways. And then you could change the scale to minor, and so you could be like, okay, F minor, that's what it looks like. But then if I went back to C major, because I don't want to change this all the time, see, I'm playing the exact same notes, same fingering, same buttons, same sound, but it's just different things lit up. So kind of like you could use it in a lot of different ways. I kind of use that as a training mechanism, but I've definitely, if I'm like doing certain songs, certain things where you have to have wide chords, it actually is really difficult to do it if you leave it in C. So for example, if I'm in A flat, right, and I need to play something that has a pad on it. I can't go here. I can't get this chord here, right? So you can hold down shift and octave and you can get that chord. So sometimes if I'm like tracking stuff for somebody and I needed that, I might punch it in, or I might just use the octave button if I had to punch it. But for a live show, you could see like, yeah, you kind of got to premeditate if you're going to do something really complicated. You got to really like work out where you want to put stuff. But at this point, it's like I could read sheet music on this, and I can see this in C and play mostly what I meant to play. So, other questions and thoughts and stuff? Yeah, what's up, man?
I know there's like a
I bet you could, if you map that to like a pitch, a pitch device in Ableton. Like if you built that into the patch. Yeah, I think you would still need to map it, or I know you still need to map it. The other like built-in function it can do is it can trigger. It can basically hit the record button for you.
Yeah, I've used that one as a record, yeah.
Some,
Not there natively, I'm sure you can max fill it.
Yeah.
Something else, like this is just a random, you said that and made me think about this, like something I was embarrassed to say I didn't know this, is if you hold shift and hit record, you're recording into a arrangement view. Like you can't see it on here, but you are recording into arrangement view. So say you were like messing around, you're like, hey, I want to like make a video and put it on Instagram, me like playing an idea with the loops I just had. You can hit shift and you can hit record and it'll record it into arrangement view. When you bring the session into, the laptop version of the DAW, like you can get a hold of it. Tight. You guys want to keep on going through the...
So it's not possible to see arrangement view using this?
To the best of my understanding, as of this moment, no.
Wow, that's wild.
But that's part of the lore of this, I think, is really getting comfortable with kind of that looping function. I'm a big fan of when I'm starting stuff. As you could tell earlier, it's like, okay, I have and you can see. Actually, I like this view a little bit more because you can see the names of the stuff up here. I don't know that y'all can, but I'm just gonna leave it like this so you can see both at the same time. This last button on the right, you can use the jog wheel to kind of jump up and down, but I'm in a spot where this is where we left this, right? I'm gonna delete some things. I got my drum beat. I don't want this track in here. I'm holding down delete and I'm just clicking stuff. I feel like this thing, yeah, it sounds like a good pad. Okay, so the other thing, and Rob said this morning, and I think it's so true, is like exploring what you like and then working from there to like, what about that is something that I want to include in my music. And with this thing, a lot of the journey has been like, okay, I heard that chord, I can play that chord on bass, but it's interesting, right? I mentioned the whole like note per string thing. One of the cool things about push versus playing a bass is that, let's say I'm playing these two notes, right? I could play this note at the same time, which you couldn't do that on bass. You couldn't have both of these at the same time, right? So this voicing, it actually is kind of a pain in the ass to play this on keyboard too, with this underneath it. Like you'll see this a lot on keyboard, but this, you don't see that a lot. So it's kind of interesting I find myself writing things on this for one of the groups I play in it's like a jazz quartet. And so I'll end up doing, shapes and stuff that maybe don't always communicate the best. Like we'll have to split it where the guitar player plays one of the notes, but it's cool because new language, new ideas, and I like the color and it sounds great, right? So in this case, I'm playing like a minor 9. If you're trying to figure out how to do this, we're in C. If you make sure you're in scale, fourths and C and all that, chromatic. I'm going to start on the second note, then I'm going to go string up, then I'm going to go string up, I like to do this. I like to have these 3 notes in this hand, 2 notes in the other hand, right? That's gonna get you a nice sound. Now I could take this note and put it down here. So now I have that like this, and then I wanted to add this, which would be like the 11, and I'm gonna do that with my thumb. So I'm doing these 3, and these 3, and then you can slide this around. Sounds really nice. And if you does anybody know what this is? Whose world is this, right? Yeah, and I forget I love music. I forget the name of the original artist there. Say it again. Yeah, he did the chop, yes sir. But yeah, you could take this shape. My left hand can move down a half step, and then you just take this whole idea, start it on this note, then up here. So you see I'm using shapes, right, to get through this. And then the last part is where I get a little... Anyway, I probably shouldn't be getting too nerdy on this, but something else to consider in this mode that's fun. Let me give us the bass line. 1, 2, ready, go. No, let's get in a different key. We've been there for a while. No, we'll stay there because it's going to be easier to see. So. All the lit up notes are going to sound really cool, and this is the root. The root is the D, which is the second one from the bottom here. But you can start on C. We'll do this with the lead. I'm jumping octaves over here with this to get where I need to go. You can just play any of these notes, it's going to sound nice. Like I'm just playing random stuff. I don't know what I'm playing. But you can see it still sounds in key. Now phrasing, in my mind, I'm thinking about this based on like the way you would speak when you're not sleep deprived like me. So you would say, "Hi, my name is Robert," right? So, "Hi, my name is Robert," right? I'm gonna take a break. Question and answer. There's my answer. Here's a question. Here's an answer. Now here's the part where I love this, and you can do this without knowing nothing about any of the notes here. You can take an idea, so like these 3 notes, and then you can just move them. Really quick, like I'm gonna do it with 2 hands. Right? It sounds a little more interesting. Some of them sound nicer than others. It gets boring when you do it for too long, right? But just that idea of like, just fuck around and find out. You know what I mean? Like literally just explore, and you're gonna find something that you like about it. It sounds gnarly, and there's stuff like on bass where it's like, this would be so hard to do this. That would take me years to be able to do that good, right? Just that. That is one of the easiest things you could do on here, right? It sounds crazy, and in context, right? You can end up being somewhere else totally. So develop, like the thing that's exciting to me about this instrument is like there's all this language to be explored, and then like dialoguing with the past as well, right? So like standards, like don't have the. So you can kind of goof around however you want, but you see some of the tricks. I love doing like stops. Sometimes I'll stop it with the play button. Sometimes if I'm feeling the flow, I'll use the lock and I'll lock it on mute, and then I'll take out the drums. And I'm gonna take this click out because we don't really need this at this point. Kind of dialogue with yourself, figure out like whatever, you know. It's like having a bandmate that's super reliable. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if y'all have had this. The bass player, here's what happens with drums all the time, right? Some dudes, it's like they're killing, everything is totally on the grid, and it's like, all right, this makes sense, and you feel safe. Then there's some people where it's like, everything's killing, and then they do the fill, and it's like, I can't tell if you're rushing right now or if you're playing something I don't understand, right? And it's like, you can kind of have this like this little blur, it can get scary. This guy's always gonna come in. You know what I mean? They're always there. They're reliable. I played it in, and it's just, you know. But it's funny when something goofy happened. I was like, "Who's getting fired?" That's the way I start talking. I'm like, "All right, hold on. Yeah, you don't need to be here anymore. No, thank you. Okay, all right, come back. Okay, tight. Yeah, we're gonna change the negotiations here. Yeah, and so I don't know. Those are some of the ways that I'm thinking about this. Some of the other stuff I put in here. You know, I put this sample of a whole song because I want to show you guys one of the things I really liked about, you know, with Live 12.1 and with the standalone. I wasn't really aware of how killing this was, but I'm going to jump back over to, this is maybe was initially the second track, but I'm going to jump over, select this clip here. This is... Delphonics. Cool. I just want to show like I showed you how I play stuff in, but like let's talk about samples. Right? Tight. Listen to this for a second. But all you gotta do, I haven't heard this before. I threw this on here. Don't know what key it's in. No context. Cool. Just get a little bit of taste of what's going on there. So let's figure out what we can do with it. So first things first is I need to find this little clip. Here it is. We're going to go back over, hit convert. I'm going to turn this into a simpler. Okay, it made it to a new track. I am going to now flip this back over to note mode so that I can play this and take a look at it. Oh, shoot, I got too excited. Let's go back one more time. Okay, so I'm here. We're back at the top. We restarted. This sample is cool, but it's not in time with the track or any of that stuff. You can hit warp. But the coolest thing is you can do this edit, and you can select the front of it, and you can say warp to grid. So let's see how it did without knowing. It did a little bit of a goofy guess there. So if I go under edit and I zoom this in, I might have to listen to it and see. Every once in a while this will nail it, and other times it'll be a little funny. Let's try hitting warp to grid. Set 1-1. This is locking up. So in some cases, if the sample's clear enough, and I've had good experiences with stuff without quantization or with no click track, I've had it jump to where it needed to be. But you can go and you could say warp to grid, and it might actually get pretty close. If we listen to it, see, it found a pulse, but it's not the pulse, right? That's okay. We don't need to worry about that. So I'm going to turn that back off. Turn warp off. Let's convert this back to the simpler. I'm going to switch the mode to slicing, and I'm going to listen to this without, I'm going to set the slice by to manual. And anything I hear that I like, when if pad slicing is on, like,
Ask
it made a little
and you
mark
shall
right there. And I'll go
receive.
back.
Ask and you shall receive. This all that belongs to me. Yeah. But all you gotta do, all you gotta do, your little love and your wish is my command.
You can, I'm doing the beat right now, but you can do it to whatever you want. So like,
All you gotta.
oh, let's try it again. Right away. We don't have to play the game of like, oh, do I need to change the click a little bit? So this loop is in there. I'll quantize this. Let's go back and see if we can find a little bit more from that. Sometimes if I'm not digging it right away. I don't know what key this is, so I'm gonna have to figure it out. So I just come over here, let's get back to our bass. Kind of want to listen to like what's in the sample, what's going on harmonically, what can I support, what can I support. The drums are probably a mistake. I was like a panic choice, right? So let's go back and listen again. Like, maybe. And I'm gonna loop it. Maybe, let's try, let's see if we can find something in there to do. So I'm gonna come back over here. I'm gonna turn off that filter because that thing's not it. Deliberately kind of flamed some of the stuff to see if we could. Cool. These are cool. Let's listen to this for a second. These are cool, but I wish they were lower. So I'm gonna come over here, and actually I can convert this whole thing into a drum rack. It'll take a second to do it. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna lower these down a little bit. You know what I mean? So kind of get like a flow going on. I've been in my own world for a minute. I'm sorry. How y'all doing?
Honestly, I didn't even know some of these things on Push 3.
Oh, tight.
That's so dope.
Yeah, man.
Can you record automation on top of one of those loops now?
Yeah, you totally could. So like, you got an idea, something you want to automate?
Pitch bend would be cool on one of those percussive things or something.
Yeah, dude. Let's do
Or
it.
like automating a reverb send to come on for part of a percussion loop or something.
So the best of my memory, I think if this was, I probably need to have a new. Let me see. Let's get back to that sample. I need to grab a. I think in drum rack, this ends up always being like you're scrolling, but the strip. But if you do, the answer is yes and then let me let's go. Let's find it. Let's find it here. Cooking time with Trusko. Here we go. No, it wasn't it. You guys see it? Oh, it's because I turned it into something else. But here, whatever. Let's go to convert. Let's turn this into a MIDI track. Let's see what happens. Let's go back. Oh, hold on. Dang. Yeah, let's, where did it go? Perk samp. That was it. Yeah, I had it muted because I was being a responsible individual, I think. At the time. Yeah, it's right here. Cool. We're just gonna convert it again. So if I leave it in simpler, it's a lot easier to do that on here. If you have like, if you're not on the push, you could do that. But I'm gonna do this. Let's go back to the slicing mode. Let's unsolo this so I can hear it. Let's turn this drum back up. I'm gonna open this. Let's get to the global. Alright, I'm gonna just stack some bits. Actually, I got a better idea. So I would turn on automated. Let's focus on this guy for a second. Needs some love. And then you could, hey, like, let's just remix the remix, right? Like that's the other thing is you don't have to stay in the same place. You don't have to. There's no rules here. Nobody's telling me what to do, So you just come up here. Let's see if. I have to something is solid that shouldn't be. There you go. Interesting. Well, hey, let's add another drum kit. So I can come over here and I'm gonna hit MIDI track. Then I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna look at some drums. I'm gonna be scrolling through here. If preview's on, you're gonna hear it. And sometimes that's helpful, sometimes that's not. But today we're actually gonna go to packs. I like some of the new packs a lot. One of my favorites is that golden era hip hop. Super cool. Let's see what's in here. Let's try let's try one of the MPE ones. This is cool. So it's gonna load. Probably it's a good idea to not leave it run when you do that. I think it loads a little quicker. But how much time we got? All right, tight. So you could see, sometimes I like to leave it on 16, and I'm leaving it straight. If I didn't like what I'm doing, I'm hitting new. Now I closed it. I'm going to try some other ideas on top of it. So I'm changing the speed of the repeat. I have this repeat button here. I turn that on. I'm changing it up to 32. Some of these are a little scary. Okay, let's see what's going on with where we were before here. Man, it's just solo simple. Yeah, ta-da.
It's easy.
It's easy. But you can kind of see so you can flip stuff pretty quickly. The sampling capabilities are super tight. I love being able to pitch stuff up and down the MPE. super fun. Any questions or like stuff you want to talk about? Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, if you're doing like something from start to finish, like what's your typical workflow? Where you like set up your instruments in Ableton, push, get an idea down, finish it in Ableton, or like what's your flow?
It depends on the song and the project. So like if I'm doing stuff for myself, like I have a project called Trusko, where it's like mostly push-based stuff. It's more hip-hop influenced. A lot of times I'm starting with like some drums, and I'm doing that in Ableton. But sometimes not. Sometimes I'll go play a kit for a second and then chop it up and put it in there. But I'm a big advocate of drums. I'm a big advocate of having all the toys available when I can. But I'm also a big advocate on restrictions. So sometimes it's a time restriction, like 10-minute tracks. Y'all know about Fact Magazine 10-minute tracks? That is one of the most educational things I've ever experienced in my life. You watch all sorts of people make stuff in 10 minutes, and you have to see them make a bunch of decisions. Sometimes people fold, sometimes it's amazing, and you see kind of like a lot of different people's flows. So from that, I started getting really interested in like, okay, I need to be organizing my kits better. I need to be organizing like all the patches and stuff. And then 10-minute track, it's Fact Magazine, F-A-C-T. Yeah. Against the clock, yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Against the clock, Fact Magazine, yeah. Yeah, they're super tight. But yeah, I'll start with a bunch of different things. It just depends on the vibe. Sometimes I work with, when I'm working with other people, see what they bring in, and then see what we need to add to it. But at home, like I have a rig where there's a couple keyboards connected to it. My bass is ready to be plugged in. There's a mic that you could point on the kit. Yeah, and I don't do templates as much as I'd like to be honest with y'all. But I think it's fun to kind of get to somewhere from nowhere sometimes, you know. But it depends on what you're doing, how much time you have, and what are the restrictions. So these days it's time, and time means templates. So. Yeah. How did I select like the the single part of the slice? Yeah. So what I had was, we were in. Oh yeah, that is fun. There's a couple ways you could do this. So let's get back to the top of it. Man, I'm probably just gonna reopen this thing so I don't have to be sifting through what just happened. Yeah. So basically, you need to. It's a lot of using this convert button. So okay, I have my. The percussion sample selected. I'm hitting convert. I can convert it to a simpler. When I'm in the simpler, you can convert it to a drum pad, and then from drum pad you could convert it to a MIDI track. You also from the top could convert it to. Oh weird, you can't do MIDI track right up front. I'm not hip to. I don't really use these buttons too much, but the simpler. I typically am doing that where I'm starting from simpler and moving on, and I'm just continuously hitting convert and selecting. Does that make sense? Is that what you were talking about?
No, I was talking about like slicing manually.
Oh, yeah.
In the top right, yeah.
Okay, so
Do that without a push?
can you? Yeah, I think you can just double click to select the spot, right?
Okay, yeah.
I almost always have a push attached.
Yeah, if you listen to it and just like key map it or something, that'd be sick.
Yeah, I haven't tried that without the old push. But yeah, doing that again. Let's go back to. I'm going to convert that same thing, convert to a simpler, flip this thing over here. I have this first device button selected. Mode, set to slicing, that's the one all the way to the right. There's a handful of these different ones. So you have classic and one shot, and that just indicates like how they're behaving, how it's behaving rather. I'm gonna move this over so you just. One shot is monophonic. But if I keep going, you get to slicing, and then you can say slice by, and I'm setting the slice by to manual.
That belongs to me, yeah. But all you gotta do, your little lad.
And then I'm hitting stop to make it go away. You can turn the pad slicing off, because you have to be careful. If you leave that on, and you had like a long one, and then you accidentally touch a button, it's gonna put another one in between the last thing you pressed. And sometimes, yeah, I have to be careful. And I came from playing the 2, right? So one of my issues too is like I used to have the sensitivity super, you know, you're kind of banging on stuff to make it happen. I don't think I have like a good.
Because my fingers hurt after a while. I mean, I'm like,
You have to be careful. I think what part of the pad's hitting. I definitely have calluses. I definitely will say though, like, yo, my
It's like up in the joints though, you're feeling it up there.
ergonomics of like how you're striking, how often, like I do have to be pretty careful. It does sound crazier, I think, than I'm actually hitting it. Like if I'm gonna play on the table the same, like it's not like, but sometimes when I'm playing drums, I hit them. But if you watch me play keys, I'm playing as soft as I can, and that's definitely one of the things with the 3 that has been a blessing, but also a challenge is learning how to get more touch on this instrument the same way you would a piano. So there's a lot of stuff. Let me see if I can just grab a piano patch real quick to show. But yeah, I'll show that. Any other questions? Yeah. Sometimes it depends on the environment. I'm not in love with the monitoring situation where it's like you're monitoring through Ableton at the time, so there's a little bit of latency. But if I'm in a situation where I have to, I will. You know what I mean? And at mortal tempos, I'm not scared about it, but like I can't do a gig with it that way. You know what I mean? Where I have to play a bunch of stuff and lock with a drummer. If I'm playing loops, I'll do that sometimes. And a lot of times I'll also do vocoder and like run a mic through this. You do have to use a XLR recorder to make that work. Or this will also take a
Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw it and I'm like, oh my god, I still have my 8-channel octave. Like I could plug my octave into this.
Yes. It's pretty lit, and Alberto's told me about people doing whole sessions, where everybody's playing stuff through this, so super tight. I saw a hand.
Oh, yeah, so you're all standalone right now, right?
I'm all standalone right now, and that's also why I'm squirming a little bit. Normally I like doing this with the laptop, but it's a good challenge for me to not.
So when you do live stuff, you still use the controller mode most of the time?
Depends on what I'm doing. Some shows I've been trying very actively. The one band I play with, Tulot, I'm the music director. We have a very tracked out show where there's like a playback person with 2 computers. I have a push, and we just want less computers right now. There's like 5 or 7 on stage, somewhere in there. So getting rid of mine was a goal. So I spent a lot of time with Wavetable, emulating. You can get I find the Wavetable, I can get really close to Moog patches with that more quickly, personally, than some of the other stuff. So all that to say, I've been building some of my shows that way, but it takes a little practice because I'm used to, it's not working. Like let me fix it real quick and then come back to playing again, So it's been a journey, but the past few months, I think maybe since March was when the update happened where these were really starting to fly solid, and or at least that's when I learned about it. No, and I'm running it pretty. Let's see where we're at. I have this thing with the laptop. I want to play everything at 64 samples, and I just feel like anything above that, I feel it too much. But I think this is probably at this is at 64. Yeah. So right, and I didn't hear any crackling. Granted, I'm using all native stuff, and that's one of the beauties of this is like the way CPU work with that. But any other questions or stuff? This, John, and then audio right there. And then you'll see sample rate, buffer size, everything's in there. Outputs, spent a good amount of time checking on that. Just to show you real fast, if I can. And if you need to start talking, I can underscore you.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, I'll just play some piano while you do it. Yeah.
Sounds really pretty. If you could just follow me around everywhere I go and do that.
Oh, man. One of my favorite memories was playing church, and the keyboard player didn't make it, so I just brought the push and played the chords. That's when there was a few times where I learned how I could play push was when somebody didn't show up to the gig. That's how I started learning how to do this on stage. It was like the drummer was late or the keyboard player was late, and it was like, can we just do it? And it was like, I'm gonna find out, and loop part of it or all of it, 64 bar loop,
Beautiful.
Alright.
Give it up for Robert, though.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you working with my sleep deprivation here.